These nieces and nephews. There are very few graduations that he has missed. He has always been there for Caroline Kennedy and for John Kennedy Jr. He's been a tremendous source of strength for all of these children. And tonight he's a tremendous source of strength for his family because he's in his home about 100 yards behind me here, I think, monitoring the efforts that are underway off of Martha's Vineyard to bring this, what I call the last lost child of our culture, John F. Kennedy Jr., a child we have known since he was a child, since 1960, to bring him home, finally. Whether it's to New York or whether he's going to be buried in Arlington National Cemetery, we don't know that yet now, but Ted Kennedy is here. He is the head of this family.
You mentioned Caroline Kennedy Schlossberg, and it's hard to imagine anyone feeling the impact of this more than her, John's sister.
It is almost impossible, I think, for anyone to feel, even to begin to feel, what pain and loss Caroline Kennedy must be feeling this evening, and probably has been feeling all weekend long since they found her and told her in Idaho. I mean, she and John Jr. were inseparable. They were quite close. They were raised by a single parent who raised them quite admirably, apart from the rest of the family. And we can't begin to measure her loss.
Mike Barnacle tonight from Hyannisport. We'll be back in just a moment. That's all for this special edition of Dateline Sunday. We'll see you again for Dateline Monday at a special time, 8, 7 Central. We'll have the latest on this story, including a look at what this means for Caroline Kennedy Schlossberg, John's sister. We leave you tonight with some pictures of John Kennedy Jr. as we've watched him grow through the years. I'm Stone Phillips for all of us at NBC News. Good night.
CNN Headline News. Hello, I'm Sachi Koto. Hope is dimming in the search for the plane carrying John F. Kennedy Jr., his wife Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, and her sister Lauren. Authorities say the focus is shifting from search and rescue to search and recovery. The National Transportation Safety Board will take over control of the operation from the Coast Guard. More than 48 hours after Kennedy's plane disappeared off the coast of Martha's Vineyard, the Coast Guard is conceding that it's given up hope for survivors. A Coast Guard official conveyed that message to the families earlier in the evening. The Coast Guard also says there were no major finds in Sunday's dives, but authorities are now focused on a couple of targets. Even earlier reports of a single ping from a signal beacon seem to have been false. Hope of finding survivors dim as time continued to pass. Coast Guard officials say that the average survival time for humans in the waters of the icy Atlantic is about 12 hours.
We know that this case is now 48 hours old. We know that the water temperatures of about 68 degrees with the statistics that we have indicate that survivability is probably not going to be much greater than 12 hours and certainly no more than 18 hours in the water. We know that the aircraft was not equipped with any survival equipment, life rafts, life jackets, anything of that nature. And I think based on all of our search and all of our calculations, when we do searches, we do them with a probability of detection for what we're looking for. The probability of detection in this case has now gotten to as close to 100% in the areas that we feel confident about as we can do it. The last factor that I want to talk about briefly is a little bit of the information shared to me by the NTSB this afternoon. And that deals with the fact that in cases like this in their history, and they have some real experts when it comes to survivability, that they could not be too optimistic about survival.
As the son of a president, John F. Kennedy Jr. grew up in the public eye, and the interest followed him into adulthood as he struggled to pass the bar exam, became an assistant district attorney in Manhattan, then launched the political magazine George in 1995. Darren Kagan looks at Kennedy's life.
To the public, he would always be John, the mischievous little boy who made the White House his playground, the solemn little soldier who saluted his fallen father while the nation mourned. John F. Kennedy Jr. was delivered on November 25th, Thanksgiving Day, 1960, the first child ever born to a U.S. president-elect. He and his older sister Caroline were the focus of enormous interest. That interest intensified following John F. Kennedy's assassination, just 3 days short of John Jr.'s 3rd birthday. His childhood was privileged, although not as private as his mother would have liked. More of an athlete than an academic, and infected with the acting bug, Kennedy opted to attend Brown University rather than his late father's alma mater, Harvard. His 1983 graduation, a BA in history, was a media mob scene. After enrolled at New York University Law School. In July of 1988,
Thank you.
he made a major debut in the political arena
Thank you very much.
at the Democratic National Convention.
Thank you. My father stood before you to accept the nomination for the presidency of the United States. So many of you came into public service because of him. In a very real sense, because of you, he is with us still.
88 was also the year that People magazine dubbed the 6'1" Kennedy the sexiest man alive. Kennedy received his law degree from NYU in 1989.
Well, I'm very happy it's over, and I'm looking forward to taking the bar this summer and following in my sister's footsteps.
Caroline Kennedy passed the bar on her first try. Her brother succeeded as well the 3rd time around. Kennedy worked as a prosecutor for nearly 4 years, racking up a 6-0 conviction record. And he led a very active social life as well, and devoted much of his time to charity. In 1995, the man who had been a media meal ticket since his birth launched a magazine of his own named George.
Ladies and gentlemen, meet George.
Its theme, not just politics as usual.
Ultimately, this magazine is going to stand or fall on whether or not it's a good magazine. And a couple issues on down the line, my last name isn't really going to matter. I grew up in a family where we were saturated with politics, and I've lost count, 5 or so relatives in politics now. I like not being in politics. I like the proximity to it that a magazine like this affords me.
Where his older sister's wedding was a pretty public affair, his marriage to Carolyn Bessette in 1996 was very low-key. Post-nuptials, though, there was plenty of press frenzy. Whether he wished it or not, John F. Kennedy Jr. seemed the heir to his parents' Camelot legacy and the keeper of the Kennedy mystique. John F. Kennedy Jr. dead at the age of 38.
Here are the latest developments in the search. Coast Guard officials say their mission looking for John F. Kennedy Jr. and his passengers is no longer a search and rescue, but a search and recovery mission. The National Transportation Safety Board will now take over the investigation from the Coast Guard. The Coast Guard says a brief signal from an emergency beacon picked up Sunday afternoon was a Coast Guard signal and not from Kennedy's plane. Extensive, detailed search of the ocean's bottom continues. And the Kennedy family says it will have no comment for the time being. Stay tuned to CNN Headline News for the latest developments. Here are the latest developments in the search for the plane carrying John F. Kennedy Jr., his wife Carolyn, and her sister Lauren Bessette. With little hope left of finding survivors, the Coast Guard says the search has been shifted from a search and rescue to search and recovery. The Coast Guard says there were no major finds in Sunday's dives, but the search is now focusing on a couple of targets identified by a sonar-equipped ship. The Coast Guard also says reports of a ping from an emergency